Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat class, Parashiot, Ahare Mot-Kedoshim. The mother, let's talk about the mother of all Mizvot. We're going to focus on the second Parashat Kedoshim, a parasha which I call super saturated with Mizvot, although not the top or even the top three Parashiot in terms of number of Mizvot, but the top parasha in terms of the ratio of Mizvot to Pesukim. 80% ratio of Mizvot to Pesukim in the parasha. You can't get more chock full. And a large percentage of those Mizvot are the most fundamental Mizvot of what they call Ben Adam Havira, of dealings, interactions, and behavior between man and fellow man. It's really a foundational parasha in terms of the way Chadash Baruch Hu expects and the standards he set for Am Yisrael to act with each other. And amongst those Mizvot is the one central Mizvah, at least that's the way Hachamim look at it, that we know very well as Ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha. And the question is, I call it the mother of all Mizvot. I'd have to definitely back that up and bring support for that bold statement. But the question really is, and this is the classic question that we have to ask ourselves, and of course the commentaries and Hachamim deal with, is, does that really mean to love thy neighbor, as they might translate, at least in the old King James Bible, like thyself? In other words, is one obligated to actually embrace and have the same feelings, the same concern and care for another person, another Jew, as he does himself? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. And we'll see why that is. But what tips us off is the actual grammatical structure of the pasuk, wherein if you wanted to say you must do something to someone else, you would say, use the word et. Ve'ahavta et re'acha kamocha. Just like you would say, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. Love God. It's a positive commandment. You don't say Ve'ahavta le Hashem. You have Ve'ahavta et Hashem. Ve'ahavta et Hager. Love the convert. And other similar statements. So Ve'ahavta le re'acha is a very interesting construct, grammatically speaking. And we have to then decipher what the Torah really wants from us. Let's start with some well-known, let's say, both phrases and incidents in the Gemara. The most known of them all is that of Rabbi Akiba, quoted in the Midrash Sifra, and there's songs about this. Rabbi Akiba Omer Zeh Kelal Gadol Batorah. This is a major principle in the Torah. Now, why would he say that? There's so many major principles in the Torah. What makes him say that? And probably what makes him say that is very much related to the famous incident of Hachamim who preceded Rabbi Akiba by 4 to 5 generations. And that is those are the famous Hillel and Shammai. And of course, the Gemara relates to us the incident where a non-Jew who wanted to convert to Judaism approached Shammai Zaken, and he said, I want you to convert me on condition that you teach me the entire Torah when I'm standing on one leg. For whatever reason, Shammai rejected him, and Hillel agreed to convert him. Okay, so then what's the lesson? How long is the course? One leg is going to have to prop you up with some type of, maybe stone or wood pillar so that you can stand up for the next, 5,000 hours, so that I can teach you this, or at least maybe the cliff notes in 500 hours, right? No, instead Hillel says, Da'alach saneh lehabrach la ta'abid. The famous statement, that which is hateful, that which is distasteful, that which is uncomfortable, that which is rejected by you, don't do to someone else. He says, that's the entire Torah, and the rest is commentary. Go study. Okay, it's the famous incident, of course. Now, that, regardless of what he really meant, that statement of Hillel in and of itself is enough to validate the statement of Rabbi Akiba. that this is a great, powerful, and let's say foundational principle of Torah. In fact, that Hillel chose that mitzvah, that sentence, that phrase in the Torah as the only thing needed by this convert to know. Of course, everything else is this commentary, so it doesn't learn everything else, obviously, but that's the centerpiece. So why is that? And why did Hillel, by the way, take the negative? That which you dislike, don't do to someone else, instead of just saying do positives to someone else. So the Kli Yakar, in his commentary in this week's parasha, on that mitzvah, explains that incident. And he said, okay, this person wasn't kidding around. He was obviously a ger tzedek, a righteous convert, who was interested in complete commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to his Torah. And what he wanted, and he wasn't just, being sarcastic, cynical. What he wanted, what does he mean by standing on one foot, is that give me off the bat something, some principle, some foundation, that if you give it to me, everything else, all other mitzvot are based upon that, can stand on it, so to speak. That's what standing on one leg, thank you. Standing on one leg means, give me something that everything else will branch out from it. It'll be the starting point of all other learning, of all other mitzvot. And he answered him, it's ahavta l'ra'acha kamocha. It's love thy neighbor. Or really, he framed it as that which is distasteful to you, that which you dislike, don't do to someone else. So what you learn here, says the Kli Yakar, from the statement of Hillel, is that indeed it should be the case that we should be able, at least in mitzvot ben adam lahaviro, man and fellow man, to extrapolate from this mitzvah all other mitzvot. Now that would be an incredible feat, but at least that certainly justifies what Rabbi Akiva said. So this is a great principle in the Torah.
Okay.
So let's dig into it. And let's talk about what does the Torah expect from us. So if I just give you some of the basic, some of the most powerful and authoritative commentaries, I think we can find a common theme, and that will help us frame the mitzvah in a very simple way, by the way. This is not going to be that completely exhaustive discussion, obviously, and that comprehensive, because that would really be a very long analysis. So starting with Ibn Ezra says on the Pasuk, V'ahavta l'ra'acha kamocha, he says, Sheyehav hatov lehabero kimol lenafsho. You should love the goodness. In other words, you should appreciate and want the goodness that affects, that is bestowed upon your fellow man, like you love it to you. In other words, it's not necessarily loving the person like you, but loving that which comes to the person like you would love that to come to you as well. That's a little succinct, right? Let's go to the Rambam. He fleshes it out more. He says on this mitzvah, this is in his book, category called Halachot De'ot, his book of Mada, and he says the Torah commanded us in this mitzvah to speak the praises of your fellow person, to be very concerned for his property and his money, to be cautious about his honor, and of course, not do the opposite of that. What are those examples of? Those are examples of how you treat somebody else. And those are examples of treating somebody else and their property and their honor and dignity the way you would want to be treated. And finally, the Sefer HaChanuch just tops that off by saying that we should have compassion on every member of Am Yisrael and their property like we would have compassion to ourselves. In other words, if I took that phrase, the three-word phrase, and repackaged it, the Torah would be saying, according to these commentaries, not love thy neighbor, love your fellow Jew like yourself, but treat your fellow Jew the same way you would want to be treated. And perhaps that is the lamed instead of the aleph tav. Instead of v'ahavta et re'acha, it's v'ahavta le, towards, right? Towards. In other words, project activity, project feeling, project treatment to someone else the same way you'd want it coming back to you. And that is the guiding principle. The guiding principle is empathy. Think right now of the way you'd want to be treated, the way you'd want someone to care about. This could be in a business context. This could be in a social context, spiritual context. The way you'd want your property treated in money, the way you'd want someone talking about you, the way you'd want someone caring for you, the way you'd want your own dignity to be protected. So also project that outwards to somebody else. It's all about treatment. It's all about behavior. It can't be about full love. Now, why was I so insistent on the fact that this pasuk can really be referring to the emotional caring and compassion and feeling of love to someone like yourself? Because again, here's Rabbi Akiba to the rescue. This is a general principle of halakha, of Jewish law. And this is in Masechet Bava Metzia. Rabbi Akiba says, Hayecha kodmin lahayech habercha. That in a number of different situations, we apply a principle that your life comes first. And there are ramifications to this, starting with saving your life. If you have to save someone else's life at the expense of your own life, and you would die, you absolutely do not do that. God would be very angry over that. That would be a sacrifice for naught. And of course, that's an extreme example. And trickling down in all other levels, whether it be money or physical protection, you come first, right? Don't go bankrupt because you're trying to help someone else become wealthy. Right? Never treat someone positively at your expense. So that is a principle of halakha. We have no right to violate that. So we're working backwards here. Because that principle exists, so obviously when the Torah tells us love, what does that mean? Love, lere'acha. It can't be the same way you're loving or treating yourself, because that's a no-no in terms of the Torah's expectation of us. Rather, it is as we framed it based on the commentaries, and that is treat somebody else the way you would want to be treated. Now, that is definitely in the spirit of what Hillel told that potential convert, right? Except for that, we have to ask ourselves, why did he spin it to the negative? He said, Da'alach saneh lahaberech la ta'abed. That which is hateful to you, don't do to someone else. He should have just said, based on what we're saying, right? Seemingly, that which you love, do to someone else. Now, why is that? And you'll notice also that this pasuk is actually neighbors in the same pasuk with other negative commandments, and that is lo tikom velo titor. Don't take revenge, don't resent or hold a grudge. Now, that is really almost hinting to the fact that although this is listed as a positive commandment, and it's framed positively, ahavta, thou shalt love, but it's amongst the negative commands to really tell us that it sort of has a foot in both worlds. How so? As explained by the Maharsha, that the truth is that this much more we can glean from it, the negative commandments. In other words, for instance, don't be dishonest, don't steal, don't hit someone else. Why? Because what I want that happening to me. Those are negative commandments, right? And really, they're much more negative than positive 365 to 248 commandments, although they're not all ben adam lahaviro, man to fellow man. Certainly, there are more negative. There are more don't do's between man and fellow man than do's, and this incorporates all of them. This incorporates the negative like the positive, and even more so the negative. In other words, just think of what hurts you, what's distasteful to you, what's hurtful, what's damaging to you. Think of detriment that you wouldn't want occurring to you. And therefore, incorporated in that is all the negatives. You want someone taking revenge against you, then what are you taking? And really what it comes out, explains the Maharsha and other commentaries, and this is the Kelal Gadol of Rabbi Akiba, that every time we transgress, certainly on a negative commandment, it's a double doozy. It's a double whammy, as they say. Which means if were I to steal from someone else, were I to hurt someone else physically, if I were to embarrass someone else, just go down the list. I'm transgressing on that specific Avirah. And at the same time, I'm transgressing on Ve'avtal v're'acha kamocha. The saneh alach, the haberachach la ta'abed. That's what you don't want occurring to you. Don't perpetrate against someone else. It's a twin. It comes with everything. And by the way, to be sure, it comes with the positive as well. And that is if you give charity, give tzedakah, positive commandment, right? You help someone when they're falling, and all the other positive commandments that were instructed and expected by the Torah. If when we fulfill them, accompanied is, oh, I've also fulfilled Atal Racha Kamocha. So this becomes the twin or the doubling of every single mitzvah of interaction between fellow man. And that is precisely what Rabbi Akiba meant by Ze Kelal Gadol B'Torah. Besides the fact that it's foundational, like in the case of the convert and the way Kli Yakar explained, that the other mitzvot are based upon it, but it is also coupled with every single mitzvah to our fellow man. Indeed, a great principle. So what I want to end, so to speak, the class with is explaining the why. Why? That sounds obvious, you know. Yeah, we're supposed to be good people. But good, of course, is a subjective terminology. And there are some cultures that feel good means doing a kamikaze drone into a synagogue, you know, or blowing some of yourself up. And that's good, right? So God, Hashem frames for us what the standard is and the absolute standard of goodness. So that's why it's not so obvious that kamocha must be. I'd like to explain why must it be, or at least what is the objective, what's the purpose of the mitzvah, and give you a number of theories. Theory number one, Sefer HaChanuk takes the obvious angle, and that is that peace is the name of the game. Peace is the end game within our nation, obviously, and then by extension to the rest of the world. You want to foster peace? Well, you start with love. You start with treatment. You start with empathy. You start with everything we just defined. And of course, that will certainly foster an environment of peaceful behavior and living and existence, coexistence in Am Yisrael, by extension, the rest of the world. That's the obvious one. Let's take the Samak, says V'Sefer Mizvot Katan. And he says that truthfully, man was created, when we see in Bereshit, all of man, Ki B'Selem Elohim Bara Ta'adam, in the image of God. And therefore, we really look at every person, every human being, but let's start with the Jewish nation, as being godly. Godly. And so we are really respecting a Kadosh Baruch Hu to a certain extent every time we respect man. And that very much segues into the next, we'll call it the third reason. And this is from the same famous Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says, look, really love of a fellow member of Am Yisrael is love of Hashem. Why? Because when you love a child, aren't you loving the father? Aren't you automatically loving the father? And really, you can flip that around and say, well, if you love the father, shouldn't you just then love what the father loves, his child? Right? And this works, you know, as almost like a positive catch-22, that we should be loving our fellow man because we love Hashem, and Hashem expects that of us, to love who he loves. But then once we do love our fellow man, we're automatically loving our Kadosh Baruch Hu as well. So they're tied into each other. There's Ahavat Hashem, which is a positive commandment, V'ahavtat Hashem Elokecha, and V'ahavtal L'Acha Kamocha. Now, the Sefer Tanya, so I'm keeping on the Hasidic route here to the Baal Shem Tov, the Sefer Tanya, explains something that is really profound. We know that famous midrash that at Har Sinai, all the neshamot, the revelation of Mount Sinai wasn't just the 2 million somewhat Jews that were living at the time, but the future souls, every Jew that was potentially going to exist in Jewish history, were all present. And he says, really, that means that we are all an extension of the existence of God. in terms of our nishamot, which you can't actually, it's intangible, define. There's no boundaries of a neshama. It's not physical. There's no way really to define in any descriptive terms of neshama. And really, they all fuse together with God as one single unit. So you can look at Am Yisrael in that respect as a single unit. And so that really we are brothers in that not just we come from the same father and descendancy, but we really have the same single root, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that manner, we're all really actually part of one single unit. So that's why we, Kamocha comes into that pasuk perfectly that way, because we really are loving ourselves when we love our fellow man. It's all the same. Hashem, us, our fellow man. And that would really tell you that, don't do something that's despicable that would be despicable to you, because you pretty much are doing it to you when you do it to your fellow man, because you're part and parcel of a single spiritual, so to speak, unit. I like to add in a couple of homemade, but there's probably anything that we come up with as a hadush was probably said somewhere in Jewish history by some hacham or person. But reason number 4, and that is the concept that the original status and the intended status of Am Yisrael was actually what occurred on Har Sinai. And that is, we know that it says, Vayihansham neged Ahar. In the singular tense, says that Am Yisrael camped at the foot of Mount Sinai. And of course, Rashi, quoting the Midrash, says they were camped, why in singular terms, like one single nation. That was the last time, you might say, sadly, that Am Yisrael truly felt like, behaved, and appeared to be Am Ehad Belev Ehad, a single nation with a single heart, so to speak. And really, that's the ultimate status that we're trying to get back to. We're working our way back to the height of our existence, because that's the ultimate intended state of our existence. And so the struggle of national perfection and getting back to a pinnacle of our nation is is constantly working hard to return to the original status on Har Sinai, which is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. And I would stay with the last reason, what I'll call the emotional one. And that is, but that at the same time means it would be ludicrous not to keep this mitzvah. And that is, if you just look at the cumulative experience of Am Yisrael over the past, well, we exist from Abraham Abinu 3,700 somewhat years, and officially from Har Sinai 33 somewhat hundred years. But in a state of suffering, depending on your historical count, from the destruction of the first temple, Churban Bet HaMikdash, 25 or 2,700 somewhat years. And that really means that if you know your Tanakh and then your subsequent Jewish history, and you understand the exiles, and we know across centuries and continents and countries what we've endured in terms of oppression and persecution and tragedy and suffering. We've basically been through everything together as a nation. We are one just by virtue of our difficult experiences. And how could we not cling to each other? We only survived because we held hands. How did we get through the Holocaust? Because we treated others exactly the way we want to be treated. And so simply by our common experience and our suffering through this very long, difficult, grueling exile together, HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects from us to cling to ourselves as if at every moment, Has v'shalom, we're in that bunker, in the barrack, in the Holocaust, God forbid. Because brothers cling together in times of need, as we always typically do. But Hashem wants that status to always exist, not just when things are going bad. At all times, for all peoples, in all places, in all cultures, in all realms, and every type and shape and size and color of Jew, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says Ze kelal gadol b'Torah. This is my great principle between man and fellow man. This is the great moral compass of how to behave and how to act. This is the Hillel adage of Da'alach saneh l'havrech la ta'abid. This is the great mitzvah of Torah, the mother of all mitzvot between man and fellow man. Da'aftal l'ra'acha kamocha. Baruch Adonai l'olam. Amen v'amen. Shabbat shalom.